Welcome to season 2 of Meeting in the Middle. This season is all about thriving beyond borders. We're going to take you on a journey through our experience living abroad and talk about several topics that others don't always want to talk about. So we hope you enjoy listening throughout this season.
See it or notice it, but we are abroad. We are not in our home countries, but what do you probably see is that we are women of color. And this episode is all about identity and growth as a woman of color ourselves, right? But first, I don't know, Tiffany, how would you actually define it? What does it mean to be a woman of color in the first place?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Gisela. Right. And I think it's one that we've talked about in the world a lot. Do I have the perfect definition? Probably not, but I can share a little bit about how I see women of color. I think one, women of color are individuals that identify as female. Two, that come from marginalized and underrepresented communities. And three, which I think is the most important, is it's not actually about your skin color. So I think we assume woman of color means, oh, I have a darker skin color, or I have a browner skin color. Woman of color actually is about both race and ethnicity. It's about where you're from. So it could be that you are African American. It could be the Latino community. It could be Middle Eastern community. It could be Asian communities.
Correct.
It could be mixed race communities. But that term is about the opportunity to have unity together for those who identify as female, for those who identify as being from an underrepresented or marginalized community, to have a unified group that can come together and talk about what that looks like. And I think it's important because it's not just about your skin color. It's about
it goes
what
way
you
beyond,
represent and
exactly.
identify with.
Yeah. It goes way beyond the skin color, as you say. But it's still, I feel, it's still interesting and important to bring that awareness. Also, for people that they might think, okay, I'm Asian and I'm thinking about moving abroad and all of these situations, so that they really identify also with us. I think that's a good thing if we come together and we see it as one force trying to change or challenge the status quo.
Exactly. I'm really curious for you, Gisela, what have been some of the things that really resonate with you in terms of living abroad and your identity and all of who you are? So taking into consideration being a woman of color, for you personally, what have been some of those things?
I, of course, identify as a woman of color. I'm a Mexican, so I'm from a Hispanic heritage. I've been living abroad since 15 years. So, of course, those two things together, they have shaped my identity, who I am nowadays, right? I first lived in Germany, then in South Africa, then going back to Germany. What I feel is every time I take parts of each culture with me. So by now, I wouldn't say I'm only Mexican. This is my core, my heart. I am Mexican. I identify with that until the very last day. I will never give up my passport, even though I barely use it. I use more the German one for traveling. But it's identify as a woman of color. I'm proud of that. Being working for over 10 years in Europe, in Germany, as a Mexican or as a Latino, it comes always with certain feelings of, I have to give always my 200%. 100% is not enough, because you are not only you, Gisela, Mexican, you are definitely representing your whole community, your whole country, who you are. So it starts with things like, I never allow myself to be late for a meeting, for example, just because I don't want anyone in Germany to say, oh yeah, the Mexican is coming late. You know, like just to not like feed these cliches or these bias. But that might be a topic for another episode probably. But like, I feel like that certain things from these different cultures have definitely shaped my identity, who I am.
Yep.
More concrete could be like, yeah, I take pride of, I speak 3 languages fluent. I feel like I can communicate in a different way with people in Germany and then here, because I speak English. So I feel like, okay, the doors, they open for you if you're willing to go a bit outside of the comfort zone and try to get to know the people from this place that you call home currently.
Yep.
So then you take that with you, and that definitely shape who you are.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, Gisela, because I feel like we've talked a little bit about this before, but how do you feel like your experience specifically in South Africa has shaped your identity as a woman of color? Like how you see, right, being a woman of color based on the friends that you've met here, the experiences that you've had. Like, how has that evolved for you coming from Germany previously to South Africa?
It's super interesting. A friend of mine told me once, like, there is a German saying, like, they say you are like a colorful dog, which is, it sounds funny in English.
It does. I want to hear more about this.
But it means like, I think like the first meaning is like, everyone knows you, or everyone like has seen you around, just because you are like different from the regular. And she was always telling me that, because I always curious about other people. I would always stop by and have a small chat and try to connect to people that are a bit outside of my network, out of curiosity. Like, I am probably naturally curious. And she was like, you're always passing by to, I don't know, we have like this clubhouse space in the state, and like I would be like, hey, hi, how are you? Hey, hello, and even like changing the language. And she was always telling me that, and then it made me like just like think. Yeah, I feel like I am a bit of a chameleon by now. I was always very active in the German community, because I do speak the language and I know the culture very well after living many years in the country. My husband is German and so on. So I could definitely identify there as well, and they adopted me as one of their own, let's say. But then I was always like interested and curious about the South African community as well. So I would always try to sneak in a bit, and people would maybe think at the beginning like maybe I might be a colored, which is a term here to define race, mixed race in South Africa. But then I would open my mouth, and then they would realize, oh, where is this accent come from? And not many people knows or are in touch with Mexican or Latino people here in South Africa, just because there are not so many. It's more common in Europe, but then here it's a bit further away. And it's different with the visas and so on. So I felt like, yeah, I just always try to take a bit of each culture with me here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it reminds me too, I feel like with my experience, specifically being in South Africa, and also similar to you, identifying as a woman of color. And for me, very similar in terms of that chameleon piece. And I had such an interesting experience with both being in South Africa and being around South Africans, and being in South Africa and being around expats. And so my experience and has been more when I'm with expats, and especially for those that are listening that may not have heard one of our previous episodes, is we are both in interracial relationships with our partners. And so we both have husbands that are white. And for the expat community, being here, having come to South Africa from the US, there's this assumption, considering that I'm a female, and then let's put on top of that, that I'm a female of color, that, oh, we must be in South Africa for my husband's job. There's no.
There's always this
There's no way.
assumption that if you relocated here is probably
Yeah.
just because of your husband's job, right?
Exactly. And there's so much, like you said, we'll get into in another episode, but there's so much bias. So we can unpeel that onion later. However, you know, I find that is one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in the expat world is that people come with their own bias around what their experience has been, and then they put that kind of on, you know, others that they meet even outside of where they designed or had and created that bias, you know, which was in their home kind of environment.
And I don't know, like something that we have in common, and that's why we're also probably good friends. One of the reasons is that we really like to go outside. We live here, the setting, for the people who don't know it, the setting in South Africa, especially if you're an expat and you have these opportunities to live in a gated community, which means like it's a big space and you have like extra security to get in. So I'm just explaining this because this is quite uncommon in Europe, so you don't have it in this way. But for countries like South Africa or even for Mexico, this is a regular thing to do in order to ensure safety. So then that means that you live inside, you have everything that you need, and even though it's amazing, we are very privileged, it's still a bubble, right?
100,
so it's not the reality, and it's not South Africa at the end, it's just a part.
Exactly.
A nice part. So we both, coming back to that point, we both are, I would say, quite curious, and we want to always go out and see. And it's funny because we would do like these outings, we would go have fun somewhere else where like our expat friends, they have never adventured to go. And then they would be like, you went where?
Even some of our local friends were like, where'd you go?
Even some of our local friends were like, we're fine. I mean, I think it's also like this kind of approach. We just try to blend in, or at least just to communicate with the people, or like, I don't know, in my case, at least I try to get to know a few words in their own languages, you know, like just to try to show that you're interested and that you care, right?
Exactly. And I feel like that has a lot to do with identity, right? Because I think that for me, and I think this would resonate with you too, Gisela, from what we've talked about before, is that it's really important. It was really important for me to leverage the time that I was living abroad and that I am still living abroad to learn. It's really easy to move abroad and
just get lost in this.
Exactly. Or you're coming here for work and all I'm going to do is work. And I'm not actually going to learn about the local community. I'm not actually going to make friends. And I think for me, that's one of the other things that I've seen and experienced as a woman of color here in South Africa, and honestly across the continent, because although I live here in South Africa, I travel significantly for my work across, you know, the continent of Africa. And you and I have talked about this before, Gisela, where traveling in Africa and being Black is the first time that I've ever felt that I was not othered.
Oh, really?
Right?
Tell me more about that, because to me, okay, I'm Mexican, and even though I know, to me, it's like you are all from the United States, so I don't have your experience in that regard. So I'm very curious, what do you say about that?
Yeah, because for me, being American and being Black American, and I just recently looked this up, is, you know, I think the last census in the US in 2020, you know, I think the Black population was something like 12 or 13% in the US. And actually the Latino and Hispanic population is higher. And then, of course, the white population.
Crazy. So first is the white population, of course. Then you have the Latino one. And then only third place is the Black community.
And so when you're traveling in the US, you are not the majority ever, right?
And it has to do with schools, probably, with
communities, neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods, like pretty much everything.
Everything. And it's interesting because when you are in that position, you learn from a very young age how to navigate that, because there's nowhere you're going where you are the majority, right?
Yeah, that's super interesting.
And so then coming here, it was really for me an opportunity to not be the other, but just to be the majority, right?
And
Just to
how,
fit in.
and sorry for interrupting, but
Yeah.
how does it feel? Like, like, do you feel like you could, like, I don't know, like, let go a bit, or like finally, like, kind of relax? Maybe I'm like exaggerating. I don't know. Like, do you feel like your own perception has changed just because now, of course, you're surrounded
Yep.
like with people like you.
Yep, exactly, 100%. And I
Ah,
think that's one of the big reasons for those who may not know that, my family, we've chosen to stay in South Africa. And that's one of the reasons is because here we feel we are more accepted. Here, I'm not worried about my 10-year-old son who's going on 11, who's big for his age, getting shot, to be honest, because
yeah,
he pulled out a
of
toy
course.
gun. I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about that here because that's not the perception, right, that the majority of this country would have on him.
Yeah, we come again back to this bias, right? What you expect
Yep.
from people from certain minorities out of maybe also like lack of knowledge, or maybe like just, yeah, like very like beliefs that you had from little, what you have heard from certain, like, it's the same for Hispanic people or from
Yep.
Black people, like some other people, and it probably applies also to Europe, like they have like specific images in their mind
Yep.
about how are we supposed to be or not to be.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I can imagine like now you feel probably way more at home,
Oh
even
yeah.
though it's not your home.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh,
And when I travel at all, it's just and I think this is a huge thing, as we go into just thinking about where we want to live,
mm,
right? And I think that that's something that sometimes people don't really realize is how much control we each have over our lives.
yeah,
And for me, personally, um, I can talk about everything that's happening externally. I can talk about what's happening in the world. The only thing I can control is my decisions,
yeah,
are,
absolutely.
how I want to show up, the environment that I want to put myself into and my family. And so we made a clear choice. Like, we want to be in this environment, right? I want to have a certain experience for myself, for my own personal identity and growth that I'm able to get living right now abroad and specifically in South Africa, and that I want to give to my children. And I think that being intentional about that when making the decision of where to go, where to live, what you want to get out of it, for me personally is really important.
No, absolutely. And what I also like know from you is like is a decision like you took it, but together with your husband, right? Like
Yep.
your husband also feels like almost more at home here by now, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that I would say, for our listeners leaving this episode, I think one really big takeaway is have a clear goal that you want to get out of your time abroad, wherever you're going, right? Whether that's, I want to speak the language, whether that is, I want to learn something about the culture, whether it is, I want to build my network. I'll tell you one thing that I did coming to South Africa that, has been huge for me, Gisela, and we'll talk about this a little more in a future episode. So make sure you're staying tuned in terms of our business and our
mm-hmm.
brand, is I created a community of practice. This had
Yeah,
nothing to do with my work. It wasn't through my job. It was that I wanted to create a network of strong, like minded female leaders on the continent. And so I took it upon myself. I reached
that's
out on
amazing.
LinkedIn.
Mm.
I said, look, would you all be interested in meeting once a month? And to this day, that network has supported me both personally and professionally. And I would have never had the opportunity to do that if I wasn't clear around what do I want to get out of my time,
And
living
probably it
abroad.
has also like to do with your sense of identity, because like now you are outside of your country, but then you feel more at home
Yep.
here. So that makes something with your own identity, your own growth.
Yep.
and you can probably take even easier action on how do you want to support also others, no? By building this network.
Exactly.
Because probably there are also like younger generations that would love to get this support at some point, but like they don't have it, especially being abroad, right? Like it's I think just a very valuable thing to start and to have.
Exactly. What do you think, Gisela? I'm curious, like, because this episode is really about us and our identity, what do you feel like was the biggest learning that you had or have had or are having, right? Because we're both still abroad, from your time living abroad?
So I would say one of the biggest learnings is just to you really learn who you are and what does it mean, and that you don't necessarily need to fit into any like how can you say, like pre-planned image of what a Latino person is or what a Hispanic person is. So that's one of the biggest learnings to me, that yes, I am Mexican, yes, I do speak Spanish, but I also do this and that. Like, to me, that's also very important, that I am able to take a bit of every culture and to apply it to my own daily life. I would say that's one of the biggest, not only takeaways, but also like biggest learnings that I'm still having now. Like, just always figure out, okay, what does it mean to be me? What do I want to pass on to my children as well? And this identity, how can you keep it alive even though you are moving overseas?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think for me, it's how important it is to be curious, which I think both of us have talked about a lot. And that at the end of the day, wherever you're from globally, whatever your experience has been in your life, we're all human. And if we can really be curious with each other, if we can actively listen to each other, if we can meet in the middle.
Yes, absolutely.
We're able to bring each other along. We're able to find common ground. And I feel like leave the world a little bit better.
Absolutely. I also feel, and I truly believe, like if you apply that, what you just said, you can feel at home everywhere. You can build your own community almost everywhere, because even though sometimes we might say, or people might say like, no, but it's difficult to live there, or people are not friendly over there, or the setting is whatever you want to think about. I truly believe, but if you're willing to get to know the people and you don't lose your own identity and you want to provide value, then it's gonna work. It's about community. It's about don't forget your own roots, where you're coming from, and what kind of value do you want to bring to this world.
Welcome to our episode on bias. This is a topic that we feel like people don't normally speak about, and so we wanted to bring it to you today, especially from a global perspective. So before we jump in, the first question is, what is bias? And first is that everyone has bias. We're going to talk a little bit about ours. And also, how do we engage and move through others' bias?